The events of this story took place when I was 18, during my senior year of high school. I'm now 27, still haunted by flashbacks from that fateful Halloween night. My friends and I loved to party, and Halloween was the ultimate excuse to dress up and act wild. Usually, my friends drew all the attention, and although we were all friends with the guys at school, no one seemed interested in anything more than friendship. On that particular Halloween, we were at my friend Mark's house. Like most high school parties, chaos reigned. Loud music, laughter, and too much alcohol. Around 11 p.m., the police were called for a noise complaint. Panic ensued, and everyone scattered to avoid trouble. My friend Sarah, who was getting into a car with her boyfriend, urged me to jump in with a guy named Jake, who promised to take us to another party. Reluctantly, I agreed, eager to escape the madness. The car ride was awkward. Jake, a tall guy with disheveled hair and an old flannel shirt, barely spoke. The musty smell of fast food and stale cigarettes filled the car. I tried to lighten the mood with small talk, but he was unresponsive. Eventually I asked, "So, what school do you go to?" "I dropped out last year," he replied, his voice low and hesitant. "How old are you?" I pressed, feeling uneasy. 26, he answered, and a chill ran down my spine. He was much older and still hanging around a high school party. Trying not to show my discomfort, I asked, "How do you know Sarah?" "Who's Sarah?" He replied blankly, and I felt my heart race. She was the girl who had sent me with him. I texted her in frustration, but there was no response. About 15 minutes later, we arrived at a house that looked run down, the neighborhood unfamiliar to me. As we approached the creaking door, I glanced around for any sign of a familiar face, but found none. The door swung open, revealing a dimly lit room cluttered with empty bottles and old pizza boxes. Inside, the air was stale, and the walls were a sickly yellow. In the living room, a couple sat slumped together, barely conscious. We passed through to the kitchen, where an older man leaned against the counter, his eyes glazed over. He said nothing, but his gaze made my skin crawl. Jake led me to a back room that felt like a makeshift lounge, filled with a group of people. I counted about 5, 2 of whom were girls looking dangerously frail. They seemed to be locked in their own world, oblivious to the growing tension. My heart sank as I noticed Jake's intent gaze upon me. "Hey, I think you're really cute," he said, stepping closer. "Thanks," I replied nervously, trying to back away. Just as he reached out to touch my shoulder, a loud commotion erupted from the other room. A girl screamed, and Jake bolted upstairs, leaving me alone and terrified. Seizing the moment, I scrambled for the window and pushed it open. Without a second thought, I leapt out and ran into the night, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I didn't care where I was heading, just away from that house and its unsettling inhabitants. I ran down the dark street, staying close to the sidewalk to avoid drawing attention. After what felt like an eternity, I spotted a brightly lit convenience store and rushed inside. The night manager helped me call my parents. I was still shaking when they arrived to take me home. Just when I thought I was safe, I turned around and saw Jake and his friend, looking through the aisles, scanning the area as if searching for someone. The next day, Sarah called, her voice filled with regret. "I am so sorry for everything. I didn't know he was that sketchy," she cried. Although she confirmed Jake's identity, it didn't ease my trauma. I often wondered what could have happened if I hadn't escaped that night. It's been almost 10 years since then, and while I know I'm lucky to have left without any physical harm, the fear of encountering Jake or his friends still lingers in my mind. It was Halloween night in 2018, and I was 17, determined to make it the most thrilling night of my teenage years. My parents had gone out of town for the weekend, so I invited my friends, Mia and Jake, over for a sleepover in our newly renovated attic. The space was decked out with spooky decorations and dimly lit with string lights, perfect for our horror movie marathon. As we settled in with popcorn and candy, the clock struck 9 p.m., and we fired up The Conjuring. The atmosphere was electric, filled with laughter and the occasional scream. After the first movie, we debated what to watch next when I noticed a strange flickering light outside the attic window. I brushed it off as a neighbor's Halloween decorations, but a nagging feeling pulled at me. After finishing our second movie, We decided to take a break and stepped out onto the porch for some fresh air. The crisp autumn breeze sent shivers down my spine, but it wasn't just the cold that unsettled me. I spotted a flickering light deep in the woods behind our house. "Hey, do you see that?" I asked, pointing toward the darkness. Mia and Jake squinted, but it was gone. "It's probably just a flashlight," Jake said, though his voice wavered. Despite Mia's suggestion to head back inside, curiosity overwhelmed us. We crept toward the edge of the woods, the crunch of leaves beneath our feet breaking the eerie silence. Suddenly, the light reappeared, dancing between the trees. As we moved closer, the flickering became more erratic, and a feeling of dread washed over me. "Maybe we should go back," I urged, but before we could turn around, a figure stepped into the clearing. It was a clown, dressed in a tattered costume, with a mask that twisted its face into a grotesque grin. My heart raced as I realized we were being watched. In a panic, we sprinted back to the house, slamming the door behind us. "What was that?" Mia cried, her eyes wide with terror. I quickly grabbed my phone, but as I tried to call for help, the power flickered and died, plunging us into darkness. The sound of footsteps on the porch made our hearts drop. They were slow and deliberate, as if the clown was savoring our fear. We searched for something to defend ourselves, and I spotted a baseball bat leaning against the wall. I grabbed it, feeling a bit more secure. As the footsteps grew closer, a loud bang echoed against the front door. "What if he gets in?" Jake whimpered. I took a deep breath and nodded toward the attic stairs. "Let's hide up there. We can call 911 from the window." We raced up to the attic, finding refuge behind a pile of old boxes. The footsteps grew louder, and the laughter of the clown echoed through the house, sending chills down my spine. Just then, I noticed something odd. There was a small trapdoor in the corner of the attic, one I had never seen before. Feeling a strange pull, I whispered to Mia and Jake, "Let's check this out." They hesitated, but my curiosity overpowered their fear. We opened the trapdoor, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. We exchanged nervous glances but decided to descend, hoping it might lead us to safety. As we crept down the stairs, the air grew colder and the laughter faded. At the bottom, we found ourselves in a dimly lit basement, filled with dusty old furniture and cobwebs. In the center of the room stood a large, ornate mirror. I felt drawn to it and approached, but as I gazed into the reflection, my heart stopped. The clown stood behind us, grinning in the mirror, but when we turned around, the room was empty. Confused, I stepped closer, and suddenly the mirror flickered, revealing a chilling scene. Our attic, but it was filled with strange symbols and drawings, along with a note reading, "The game is just beginning." Panicking, I turned to Mia and Jake. "We have to get out of here." But as we rushed back up the stairs, we heard a loud crash from above, followed by a sinister voice echoing through the house. "You shouldn't have come here." We burst into the attic, our hearts pounding. The clown was back, but this time he wasn't alone. There were several other figures, all wearing the same creepy clown masks. "Welcome to the party," one of them shouted. Just then, Mia pointed at the corner of the attic. "Look!" A trapdoor opened and a light flooded in. We made a break for it, sprinting down the stairs and out of the house, not looking back. We bolted to the neighbor's porch, breathless and terrified. It wasn't until the police arrived that we found out the truth. They informed us that the previous owners of our house had gone missing years ago, and it was rumored that they had been involved in a dark cult that held strange rituals in the woods. In the days that followed, we learned that the clown costume was linked to that very cult, and the flickering lights were signs of their activities. As for the figures we saw, they were never found, and the attic remained untouched, haunted by the memories of that night. But the most chilling revelation came weeks later, when Mia confessed she had seen something in the mirror, too. "There was a little girl in the reflection," she said, her voice trembling. "She looked just like me." It dawned on us then that the game was far from over. Whoever, or whatever, was in that house had marked us, and we had unwittingly become part of a sinister ritual that was only just beginning. My older cousin, Alex, was throwing a Halloween party at his apartment. He was a freshman in college, and I was only in 8th grade at the time. With our aunt and uncle out of town for the weekend, Alex seized the chance to invite everyone over, making it clear he didn't want me around. Luckily, I had plans to go trick-or-treating with my friends, Leo and Max. We knew this would probably be our last year going door to door, so we were determined to make it memorable. After school, we set out into the evening. The timing was perfect. Nearly everyone was answering their doors, and we quickly filled 2 bags with candy before the sun set. We dropped off our stashes at home and headed back out with empty bags and flashlights, ready for round 2. Around 9 p.m., the streets grew quieter. Fewer houses were giving out candy, but we were too caught up in the thrill of the night to stop. By 10:30, we called it quits, feeling accomplished after a night of mischief. It was late, a school night, but we had planned to skip class the next day anyway. After all, nothing exciting was happening at school. As we wandered the dim streets, someone suggested visiting the old Winfield house. Local legend told of a dark history, a family tragedy where a young girl had died mysteriously, and her father later took his own life in the house. Abandoned and boarded up for years, it loomed ominously at the end of the street. When we arrived, the house appeared even more eerie in the moonlight, larger than the neighboring homes with a rusting fence tangled in thick vines. The front gate was easy to hop, heightening our excitement as we slipped around to the back to avoid being seen. The back door was barricaded with an old cabinet, but we quietly pushed it aside. The door creaked open, revealing a chill that cut deeper than the cold October air. Our flashlights struggled to slice through the darkness that clung to the walls, making the air feel heavier with every step. This wasn't just an abandoned house. There was an unsettling quiet, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. We found ourselves in a narrow hallway. Old, faded wallpaper peeled from the walls, and the floorboards creaked under our weight. Trying to break the tension, I made a joke, but my voice felt small and thin in that suffocating silence. Leo, ahead of us, pointed his flashlight down the hallway, illuminating doorways that led to rooms that had once been filled with life. We decided to check the kitchen. An old, rusted fridge sat in the corner, still guarding its long-forgotten secrets. When Leo opened it, a smell unlike anything I'd ever experienced hit us. A mix of decay and something even worse, something almost unnatural. The stench clung to the back of my throat. Inside the fridge, remnants of old food lay rotting. We exchanged glances, our nerves already frayed, but curiosity kept us moving. Leaving the kitchen, we ventured into the hallway. Max discovered an old wooden staircase leading to the upper floor. The sight made my stomach churn. The steep steps were dark wood, chipped and cracked, leading up into a void of shadows. Reluctantly, we followed Max as he climbed halfway up the stairs, flashlight illuminating patches of peeling wallpaper and a tattered rug covering the creaking steps. Upstairs, the air felt even heavier. The hallway narrowed, walls pressing in as if they were closing around us. The first door we reached was slightly ajar. Max pushed it open slowly, revealing a small bedroom, mostly empty, except for a bed with remnants of old, decaying sheets, stained with dark spots. On a small dresser by the wall, something glinted faintly in the beam of our flashlights. It was a locket, which Max picked up and studied. Inside was a faded photo of a little girl, her expression frozen in an almost haunting smile. The metal felt cold, colder than it should have been, as if it had been kept in ice. As we moved farther down the hallway, a strange sensation crept over me, like eyes were following us from every shadow and darkened doorway. Then we heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoing down the hallway. They weren't ours, and they weren't coming from Max. No, these footsteps were heavy, deliberate, coming from somewhere above us. My heart raced as we listened to the slow, dragging steps moving closer, one deliberate footfall after another. The weight of each step pressed down, making the floor groan and creak. It was probably just an animal, but it didn't sound convincing. Steeling ourselves, we stepped into the room at the end of the hallway, a larger space that might have once been a family room. Everything felt wrong here. The walls were covered in deep scratches, jagged marks that had crumbled bits of drywall to the floor. The air grew colder, and a low, almost inaudible whisper drifted through the room, like a distant voice just beyond our reach. Though we couldn't make out the words, there was something sinister in that whisper, making the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I felt an overwhelming urge to run, to escape the house, yet something held us there, as if the house itself was reluctant to let us go. Suddenly, we saw it, a shadow crossing the threshold of the doorway, slow and barely visible in the faint light. It moved with an eerie slowness, as if taunting us. My mind raced, convincing me this was impossible, that no one could be there. Breaking the silence, I shouted for us to leave. Leo was already at the door, his flashlight bouncing as he ran. Max turned back, glancing one last time at the shadow watching us with unseen eyes. We stumbled down the stairs, each step stretching on, the weight of that shadow pressing down with every footfall. At the bottom, we didn't stop to look back. We ran through the hallway, out the door, and didn't stop until we were blocks away, gasping for air, trying to comprehend what we had just experienced. Back at Leo's house, we sat in silence, struggling to make sense of our encounter. The quiet was thick, no one daring to voice the fear gnawing at the edges of our thoughts. It felt as if we had barely escaped, like the house was reluctant to let us go. Finally, Max broke the silence. He described the sensation of something upstairs, like the walls were breathing, watching us. The smell lingered in his memory, a reminder of our harrowing experience. As he shifted on the couch, something fell from his pocket, hitting the floor with a soft thud. The color drained from our faces when we looked down. It was the locket, the one we'd found in that upstairs bedroom. None of us remembered Max taking it. We had left it behind, hadn't we? Max looked horrified, shaking his head, insisting he hadn't taken it. Yet the locket shouldn't have been there. Yet, somehow, it had followed us. I leaned in to pick it up, when the temperature in the room dropped suddenly, an icy coldness settling over us. Then, faintly from the locket, we heard it, a whisper, just like the one in the house, soft and sinister. "Come back." I jerked my hand away, and Leo backed against the wall, pale. Max's hands trembled as he tried to rid himself of the locket, throwing it across the room, but it seemed to move, inching its way back to him. Desperate to stay close, Max stammered in confusion, his voice barely audible. None of us had answers, only a sinking feeling that whatever was in that house had latched onto us. That night, none of us slept. Strange occurrences began in the following days. Max heard footsteps outside his door at night, slow and heavy, like someone dragging their feet. Leo found scratches on his walls, resembling those in the house. I began having vivid nightmares of that shadow following us, whispering for us to return. We had escaped the Winfield house, but we hadn't truly left it behind. It had come with us, tethered by that locket. A reminder, a warning, and a curse. We weren't free. We were haunted. Now, even though I can't explain how or why, I know one thing. Whatever we unleashed that night is still out there, and it's waiting.